Okay, we are going to record today, just for anyone who's kind of missed this afternoon's little presentation. We only plan to talk to you a few minutes to continue the conversation from the Staff Development Day. Myself and Kerry will just touch on a few ideas around the concept of blended learning and really what advantage we're going to hopefully realise over the coming years. And today really, as I said, is just to continue the conversation and give you as much time in your KLAs to discuss how the 7 and 9 classrooms are going to look next year. One of the things that we've been posting on our Google site is as much background as we can give you with respect to what is blended learning, how it looks in various classrooms, what it means in various contexts. One of the things that becomes evident just by the fact that I've a simple grab there of 4 definitions is that blended learning hasn't been quantified. There is not a nice definitive definition of what blended learning is, and it doesn't really matter who you read. They will put up 2, 3 or 4 different definitions depending upon their particular context and the particular purpose for which they are writing against. So we're not going to today come at one definition of what blended learning is or how it's going to look like in your classroom, because even within your KLAs it may look particularly differently, and particularly when we start to talk about differentiation, we're going to expect that we're going to see a blended approach which might be very different in neighbouring classrooms. So we're not expecting to tie everyone down to one type of blended approach. Now, part of the examples that we provided last time is that blended learning means lots of different things in different contexts. So we've already spoken a little bit about what is flipped learning. We've spoken a little bit about what is project-based learning or problem-based learning, challenge-based learning, any of the XBL type experiences. These are all examples of what we mean by blended learning approaches. Blended learning also doesn't mean just the iPad or whatever the technology is in the classroom. Okay, there are lots of different things that you can do to have a blended instruction. So you don't even need the technology in the classroom to blend your instruction if you think about it in a flipped concept. So the technology might be used at home, for example. Broadly speaking, the simplest definition that we have is that blended learning obviously is face-to-face plus using some sort of online learning. Now, the great promise of online learning is differentiation or personalisation. The tools aren't quite here yet. So you'll read a lot about one of the great, or trying to realise one of the great leverages of technology is that we can personalise learning for students. And that's what NAPLAN Online next year is meant to do. NAPLAN next year is meant to be a test that will be unique to each student's skill set depending upon the answers that they give within the test. So that's where we want to be with our learning. We're almost there with our assessment, but we're certainly not there with our learning tools. And there are no learning management system or LMS systems available at this point that allows you to load in a multitude of learning strategies, pedagogies, etc., and then allow students to pick a path through it based on a certain set of responses that they put in. Some attempt to do it, but none of them really do it in a way that is really meaningful for the course that you are teaching in your classroom at Cerdon College tomorrow, or next week, or the week after. So we won't realise that particular benefit. But one of the things that we put up on the Staff Development Day is this slide, and I like touching on this slide again because I think that there are some really important learnings from this way of thinking that really apply to us. And a few of the things that we try to do here, I hope, is that we try to focus on mastery. And so one of the things about using the technology in the classroom is that we can pick paths through learning that allow kids to demonstrate mastery. So a really good example of this is VET. VET's based on competencies. You're either competent or you're not. You're not half competent, and you're not 3/4 competent or 1/3 competent. You're either competent or you're not. You can either Julian a carrot or you can't. You can either clean up after yourself or you can't. So we don't go, let's split the difference and give you a B. You're either you are or you're not. But mastery learning or online resources gives us the capacity to, oh, there you go, should be somewhere else. it does give us this capacity to focus on moving kids through in a way. Oh gosh,
They really want you to.
they do. Don't notify me again. Go away. It's great, isn't it? That'll come up in a little slide. So it does give us the capacity to allow kids to move through the curriculum at their own pace, focusing on mastery. Sometimes we talk about things, and the video that we'll go through in a moment explains this quite well, is that we forget some of the things that we know that's really important from time to time. So, for example, direct instruction. If you read the literature, there's nothing wrong with direct instruction. Read Hattie's work. Direct instruction is one of the top 5 pedagogies or methodologies, if you like, that has the greatest impact on student achievement. So there's nothing wrong with direct instruction. In fact, sometimes direct instruction is the best way to do things. Right? Blended approaches don't take away from those sorts of things. But what blended approaches do give us the opportunity to do is to take on some other possibilities, such as game-based learning, which we'll do a lot later, virtual learning, and inquiry, or project-based learning, which we'll talk about a little bit more in term 4. So it's about realising what we couldn't do before. And this is the approach that we want to start to think about. I think this is the best video that actually demonstrates what blended approaches are and how they best work. And there are a few takeaways from this, I think, that we can talk a little bit about this afternoon in your groups.
I can say that the things I've been doing the last 2 years have really made a difference because my kids have scored the highest in the state on the standardized tests. So what we're doing here is working and it's helping them be successful.
We define blended learning as the combination of digital content and activity with face-to-face content and activity. It sounds easy to blend, but it looks very different in every classroom. So if a teacher is using something that works really well in a face-to-face situation, they should continue to do that because it works well. If they can find something else that works better, is more efficient or more effective that's digital, then that would be implemented.
What I have online could be completely different than what the biology teacher has online or what the physical education teacher has online. It just depends what you need those kids to have in order to understand what they need to learn.
Okay, go ahead and get the laptops. And actually, anybody that's in a small group, come over here. I need you to get an iPad.
Why I wanted to go to a more blended environment was so that I could figure out a way to differentiate instruction within the biology classroom. And I wanted a way to be able to work with students in small groups while other students are still engaged in content learning.
There are 3 activities. One's a sorting sentence activity, one is an online interactivity, and one is small group that's going to be working with me. Okay, slide to the apps and open up EduCreations. Because we're going to fill in this chart, because this is going to get us practicing base pairing between DNA, RNA, and reading our codon chart. Okay, so what goes with G? C. So I'm going to put G and C together like this, right?
I've probably learned more today just by doing this than I have the whole week that we've been doing this.
We looked at the research about blended learning, we defined it, and then we had to figure out what would it look like in my class. And so that's when I went, well, I actually want to use it more as a tool for the kids for like supplemental materials.
Top or the bottom of the cylinder.
There's always practice problems, or you can go listen to somebody talk about the topic. But the kids started to say that we don't want to listen to somebody else, we want to listen to you. And we need your help. And we want to hear your voice. So I started to go, okay, well, how can I do that? And so our technology person said, have you seen this app on the iPad? And me not knowing anything about technology went, I have no idea what you're talking about. Teach me. So we went through a process of me learning how to use the Show Me app. And then I started making podcasts, and it gives me a chance to be in their homes, wherever they are, 24/7. It's virtual weller is what we call it.
And that will correspond to 6 to 9, like it has in the rest of the problems.
The podcast like helps so much. It's like as if she's actually there, and she just goes through it again, and you can like finally understand it.
I see them, they'll plug in, I look over and they have it on their phones, they have it on their tablets, they have it on computers. They do podcasts for me during class time. I will have specific problems I want to see, just like, do they understand the basics of what we talked about today?
40 divide 40 to get C by itself. And C
is equal to 40.
For me, classroom time, direct instruction, investigations, discovery, that's all still part of teaching. It's not all online. A lot of the face-to-face stuff is still the most important thing to me. The online tools are there to help make understanding even better, even more rich of an experience for the kids.
We really wanted the focus to be on the teaching and learning part and on the digital tool as a secondary thing.
Kids don't always get it the first time, or the second time, or the third time, and this allows different ways for those kids to get it. The pass rate for my kids the first year was 75%, and the second year was 93%. The state average is somewhere around 60%, so something's working for these kids.
All right, so some takeaways. So the first thing is that we're talking about student-centered stuff, right? So the focus, yes, for us is on teaching and learning, but it's really about student-centered stuff. What does that mean? In the video, they were talking about the fact that kids don't get it the first time, the second time, or the third time. Sometimes they need multiple attempts at this. Now, last time we started to talk about this, some of the feedback was, well, we can't be available 24/7. Well, you can't physically be available 24/7, but that video that you make that explains that particular concept can be available 24/7. So if the kiddie wants to get up at 3 o'clock to have another go at practicing that particular thing, they can do that because you do virtually become available to them all the time. The second takeaway is, and I think this is really important, the kids want to hear from you. They don't want to hear from some know-it-all across the world in an American accent explaining some concept that they've been learning about in the classroom. They want to hear from each of you. They want you to create the content and not just be consumers of it. So they want to hear from you as to how do I go about solving this problem? What is the understanding I need to take away from this particular concept? That's a really, really important thing to consider. And the third takeaway there is that there's stuff that you're going to do that appears in this top bubble, which you have done today, and in this bubble to the left, and which you will continue to do tomorrow because it works. And no one's asking you to change any of those things. We're not asking you to go purely online for the sake of being purely online. The blended approach that we're trying to consider and to adopt is really the approach that says, well, what is it that I can do outside of the classroom for students that is going to supplement the really good things that I do inside the classroom? That's the first thing. And the second part of our approach is, well, if I'm doing some things in a really labour-intensive way in the classroom, how can I use a blended approach to make them much more efficient? So they're the two things that we really want to do. How do I supplement the good things that I'm doing in the classroom with some stuff outside the classroom? And how do I leverage the technology to do some things much more efficiently for my students? And we'll talk a little about assessment and pedagogy because they're the building blocks of how we're going to achieve these kind of integrations with our blended learning.